Welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak Rubin speaking to you just east of Jerusalem. Today is the 20th day of the month of Tammuz, 5782. It's July 19th, 2022. This coming Shabbat here in Israel, we read Parshat Matot, which is the penultimate Parsha, penultimate Torah reading of the book of Bamidbar, Numbers. And in the diaspora this week, people will be reading Parshat Pinchas, which we read last week, but I believe next week, as we read the final Parsha of Bamidbar, Numbers, then the people in the diaspora will be reading a double Parsha, Matot Mas'eh. So they will catch up and we'll be on the same page once again. It's been a long time. It's been ever since the final day of Passover, months ago, that we have not been reading the same parsha, and there have been opportunities for the diaspora to catch up. And what I mean by that is that there are certain portions, designated portions in the Torah reading throughout the year, which can be doubled up and become a double reading. And there's been a few of those in the past few months that were not taken advantage of in order to catch up. I don't know why. I'm not familiar with the custom. I would think that we would want to be in the same page as quickly as possible, so that we can move forward together on the same page. Being on the same page with the diaspora is very important. And the diaspora being on the same page with Israel is very important. We're one people with in very many ways. There are many differences in our outlooks, in our lifestyles, in our realities, because the reality here in the land of Israel is, quite frankly, unlike any other reality outside the land of Israel. And we should always strive to unite around as much as we can. And I would think that the Torah reading is the place to be united on. So I'm very happy that next week we'll be on the same page, and we'll continue on the same page for the foreseeable future. And I just don't know why it took so long. I think we can do better, but maybe I'm missing something. This week's Torah reading, as I said, is Parshat Matot, which means, what does Matot mean? In this case, it means, I think it'll be translated as tribes. A mateh is a staff, and the head of the tribe would have a staff, and that would be symbolic of his position and symbolic of the tribe itself. So matot here, which literally means staffs, it refers to tribes. Parshat Matot begins in Numbers 30. Chapter 30, verse 2, concludes chapter 32, verse 42. We'll be talking about it very soon. But before we get into that, I want to remind everyone that we are in the midst of the 3 weeks of mourning, known in Hebrew as Bein HaMitzarim, which means between the straits, between the narrow places, which is taken from a verse from the book of Lamentations, which, of course, written by Jeremiah, all about the aftermath of the destruction of the first temple and the destruction of the city of Jerusalem and the first exile into Babylon. Bein HaMitzarim, the 3 weeks, began on Sunday, which was the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, even though it was actually the 18th day of Tammuz, because the 17th day was on Shabbat, and we do not fast on Shabbat ever. The only time we ever fast on Shabbat is if Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat, and then because Yom Kippur is a Shabbaton, it is a holiness that we make that one exception, and we would fast. But of course, that's a fast of atonement. It's not a fast of mourning, which the other fast days of the year are. And mourning on Shabbat is forbidden. even in the case of a person who, God forbid, has lost a loved one, pretty much every custom of mourning is suspended on Shabbat. Shabbat is a joyful day, and so this last Shabbat was the 17th of Tammuz, so we actually fasted on the 18th of Tammuz, and in fact, the Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which is the full 25-hour fast, and I say 25-hour because it begins a bit before the onset of the day of the 9th and ends just a little bit after. However, I must say, I was going to say it also falls on Shabbat, so it also will be pushed off for a day. And obviously, we do not begin fasting on Shabbat. We'll only begin fasting immediately with the conclusion of Shabbat, so it won't be quite as lengthy a fast. So we're in the midst of the 3 weeks, and these 3 weeks, we say 3 weeks of mourning because we are mourning the destruction of both the first and second holy temples. Each temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. The 17th of Tammuz marked the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem by the Romans in the year 70 CE, 3 weeks before the destruction of the second holy temple. It also marks other tragedies, as we've posted, and we have on our website a page dedicated to trying to understand the 3 weeks. It is in the study tools section under the menu called, and I'm just going to double check, study tools, days of note, and you'll see the 3 weeks, and it describes why we have the 3 weeks, why we have the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, and what we need to do with it now in our day. And why do I say that? Because things have changed. Traditionally, it's 3 weeks of fasting, 3 weeks of mourning, and by mourning I mean certain customs that we as Jews abide by, observe when mourning a loved one, the passing of a loved one. We practice some of those same customs during these 3 weeks, and in fact, as we move forward, the mourning customs intensify, which is the exact opposite, really, when you're mourning the loss of a loved one, where throughout the year, the official year of mourning, you go from the most intense period, which is the Shiva, the first 7 days following the death or burial, and then the Shloshim, which is the first 30 days, the first month, where the customs that we adopt for mourning are still quite intense, although somewhat modified from the 7 days. And then the next 11 months is less in terms of the customs that we follow. It's the year of mourning. And during the 3 weeks, we actually intensify as we go along. We intensify as we reach the first of the month of Av, Rosh Chodesh Av. And of course, the most intense day is the fast day of the 9th. But something's changed in our lifetimes, and that is the state of Israel, independence, the return of national sovereignty for the Jewish nation, for Israel, in the land of Israel, and the liberation of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount in 1967, and we can't really honestly regard the 3 weeks today as we once did. Once it was a period of intense mourning because the Jews were in the diaspora, in the exile, and had no sovereignty and had no recourse to trying to fix the situation, as in rebuilding the Holy Temple. So we mourned. And I just want to, having said that, I just want to note that there were times over the past 2,000 years, mainly in the first few hundred years following the destruction of the Second Temple, that there were attempts, realistic attempts, at rebuilding the Holy Temple. There were a few occasions where the Roman emperor, for various political reasons, gave a green light to Jews to rebuild the Holy Temple. It did not come to fruition for political reasons. But I'm saying this because, given the green light, the Jews quickly organized and were already working on what was necessary to rebuild the Holy Temple. They were not passive, and they did not forget the Holy Temple and not have the attitude that they had outgrown it, or that it was no longer necessary, that the offerings were no longer viable. They were very ready to rebuild the Holy Temple and renew the avodah, the service in the Holy Temple. It just did not come to be. But it's important to realize that and keep that in mind, that it hasn't been, once this temple was destroyed, Israel did not immediately go into a oh, well, nothing we can do, I'm just so sad mode of thought. No. In fact, for many, many years, many decades or more following the destruction, not only did the Kohanim, the temple priests, keep their enrollment in the different, what's the word I'm looking for? The different groups. They would go take turns serving in the Holy Temple, and each one was organized. Each group had its own list of people, Kohanim, and times for when they would be in the Holy Temple. And those lists were maintained, those schedules were maintained for many, many years. And in fact, when there was the potential that your list, it was your time to do the service, and people who were Kohanim, who were on that list, would not drink alcohol, because you can't drink alcohol while you can't be under the influence of alcohol while you're performing the service in the Holy Temple. And just in case the Holy Temple were to be built in an instant, they wanted to be ready. And so they kept that tradition for many, many years after the destruction. But the exile did its thing and ground down the Jews in many, many ways. Jews never forgot the Holy Temple, never forgot Jerusalem, have been praying for it daily, many times daily, for thousands of years. Yet when we return to Israel and we return to the Temple Mount, suddenly we sort of didn't know what to do next, because we had become so conditioned toward thinking of it as, an impossible dream. We had turned rebuilding the Holy Temple into an end of days, miraculous, supernatural event, which it wasn't when the first temple was built. It certainly wasn't when the tabernacle was built, and it certainly wasn't when the second temple was built. And there's absolutely no reason, precedent, that it would be different in the third temple. In fact, the commandment is for Israel to build a sanctuary for Hashem, and it's for us to do, not to wait for Mashiach, not to wait for it to come down from heaven, as a certain tradition began, that it's just God's going to just reward us with it one day if we're good people. If we're good people, we will reward Hashem by building the Holy Temple, because it is His request, really. Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. They will make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell within it, amongst us. Once we build a sanctuary, this, of course, is from the verse 25:8, the book of Exodus. God spoke that to Moshe on Mount Sinai. So it's up to us. And it's taken Israel, my generation, maybe the past 2 generations, a bit of time to begin to wrap our heads around this new reality and to say, wait a minute, what are we waiting for? What are we asking of Hashem? Like, we're the ones who're supposed to be doing it. Let's get to it. And of course, that is the clarion call of the Temple Institute. That's what we do. That's what we were established to do when in 1987, when the Temple Institute was first began. That's been our goal, to do everything we can in our power, physically, practically, spiritually, education-wise, to get ready, to get the people ready, and to get the materials ready for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. And of course, that's everything from the temple vessels, which we have recreated. They're kosher, they're ready for use. Of course, this is also our pursuit of the red heifer, which I know we keep it under wraps, and we have many reasons for keeping it very quiet. But we are working very, very intensely and steadily on achieving that. And of course, maybe the biggest challenge is education, is getting the word out, is getting people on board, is changing the mindset of people and changing people's hearts. Again, we have to turn it around. People have to realize that the Holy Temple is for all the nations. It's a place of peace. It's a place of prayer. It's a place where we could all come together as equals. We could all bask in the light and the presence of Hashem. And we can only gain from it. Haggai, the prophet Haggai, said, "I will, in Hashem's name, in this place, I will establish peace." It's gotten a reputation at Temple Mount as being a powder keg, as being a tinderbox about to be ignited, and the most contested place on earth, a place that's going to lead to World War III. No, that's fake news. Fake news. Yes, there's violence there sometimes. Yes, but we allow it. We feed into it by believing it, and there are people, forces, politicians, pundits, journalists, terrorists, all sorts of people who want us to believe that it's a place of war, a place of conflict, a place of violence, and we just have to stay away from it. No good will come of it. The exact opposite is true. It's a place of peace. God would not rest his presence anywhere but in a place of peace. And God chose this place from the very beginning of creation. So, the Temple Mount is a place of peace because it's the place where the Holy Temple will be built. And we just have to start thinking that way and realizing that. And the reality will change, and it is changing. And more Jews in Israel and outside of Israel are connecting to the Temple Mount and connecting to the dream of the Holy Temple. And of course, not just Jews, but Gentiles around the world are also turning on and plugging into the dream which can come true if we make it come true. And making it come true means hard work, persistence, integrity, and also patience. God willing, we'll build it tomorrow. God willing, we'll build it today. But we have to have patience because we still have a lot of hearts and a lot of minds which we need to turn toward the light, toward the dream, toward the place where God's presence, Shekhinah, will rest. For all of us to bask in and to be blessed by. So that's my take on the 3 weeks today. the 3 weeks today means, yes, thinking about what happened in the past, of course, thinking about the tragedies, thinking about the reasons behind them, which we all know, especially the Second Temple, was tremendous disunity and infighting and internecine fighting amongst the Jews at the time, which led to destruction. And we have to guard against that, and we have to be united, that's for sure. But we also have to think about practically what we can do. What are we doing? What am I doing to make this happen, to make this move forward, to be a part of it, to be a part of history, to be a part of the prophetic history, to be part of a vision, a better tomorrow with the Holy Temple, with the Beit HaMikdash, the center of creation, from which forth will spread the light of goodness, the light of truth, love, unity, brotherhood, all good things. So let's take these 3 weeks to really think about it seriously, contemplate it, and make a decision to do something, anything, even if it's just picking up a book and learning something that you didn't know about the Holy Temple, about the Temple Mount, about the dream, about the pursuit. Do something, anything. Support the Temple Institute. That's also an option, which we tremendously appreciate because it's your support which allows us to continue to work. And that is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You who support us, you who contribute, make donations, you are making it happen. You're making our work possible. And our gratitude is enormous. We're very, very grateful for your support. Joe Biden was here last week. He was here in Israel for a couple of days, and he went to Saudi Arabia. He's a very sweet guy. There were some tender moments while he was here. But overall, if he was really setting out to accomplish anything in his visit to Israel and Saudi Arabia, I think it didn't go so well for him. He mostly was here, I think. It stopped in Israel, on the way to Saudi Arabia. His real reason for being here was to ask the Saudis to increase their oil production. And of course, this meant confronting the man who he had called a pariah and making nice to him. Didn't go so well. He got a very cold shoulder when he went to Saudi Arabia, and what he was hoping for, he didn't get so much. And another thing that he was allegedly trying to push was greater cooperation, a more open cooperation between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Israel and Saudi Arabia are growing closer, that's for sure. But American involvement in it and America trying to take the lead isn't going to work. Certainly not at this time. America's still got a lot of cleaning up to do concerning its relation with Saudi Arabia. And I have to say that Saudi Arabia, for years and years, America was very close to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia had the oil. America needed it. And Saudi Arabia, for years and years, for decades and decades and decades, has had a horrible human rights record. For some reason, that has only been noticed by the United States in the past years, when only since a journalist who actually was a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, not a good person, was murdered, and the United States obviously accuses Saudi Arabia of being behind the murder. But I must say that Saudi Arabia today is actually, for the first time in its history, has been changing laws, loosening up, giving greater rights to women. A long way to go still, but they're being consistent, greater freedom to women, allowing other religions entry and access into places in the country which never was before. And certainly they've been purging their their textbooks and their media of anti-Semitism, which was always very, very virulent and very harsh throughout many, many years. And they've actually done tremendous work in that effort, in that aspect. So they're basically working on it, trying to enter into the modern world, trying to not be based simply on an oil economy, which they realize is not going to sustain them for too much longer. And rather than treat them like a pariah, I would think that the United States would be very interested in encouraging this, but who knows? I don't know what the United States is really after or up to. But in Israel also, he wants to make nice of the Palestinians. He started sending $500,000 again to the Palestinian Authority, which is going to take the money and use it to pay salaries to terrorists. We all know this. There's nothing new about this. He went to Bethlehem, and he was met there by Abu Mazen, the head of the Palestinian Authority, and he made a speech. And in his speech, he said, and this really irks me, he said, as an Irish American, I can relate to the Palestinians because of what England did to Ireland. Now, excuse me? What exactly do we have in common? Israel, Palestinians, England, Ireland? If you have a beef against England, Mr. Biden, go to England and express it. There's nothing historically, morally, in any way, shape, or form in common between the conflict here and the conflict there. And all you're doing by saying that is opening up a whole other venue of being anti-Semite, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel by saying, oh, he's right. Look how horrible the British have been to the Irish. Israel's exactly that same way. What are you talking about, Joe Biden? Where do you come up with this? And, Ireland today officially is pretty anti-Israel, and there's tremendous anti-Semitism in Ireland, and you've just thrown some fuel on those flames. We don't need that. That was I don't know what you were trying to get at there, trying to, show some kind of affinity with the Palestinians. You want to show affinity? Tell them to get their house in order. Tell them to stop being corrupt. Tell them to stop preaching hate. Tell them to stop preaching in all their textbooks and their media and their preschools and their mother's milk to murder Jews. Tell them to become human beings, to behave like human beings. They are human beings, to behave that way. And then we'll have something in common. Don't feed them more ways to hate and more ways to manipulate other people to hate. I'm sure that line about Israel and England and Ireland, I'm sure it's going to be used. I'm sure it's going to make the rounds for a long time now. And I don't know, the United States was trying to promote some kind of mutual defense accord between Israel and Saudi and other countries. And there's Israel and the other countries, the Gulf states and other countries, Morocco, are deepening their coordination in defense as well as many other things. The minute the United States steps in, it cools everything off because the Arab states don't have confidence in the United States anymore after pulling out of Afghanistan, after trying to cozy up and make an agreement with Iran. The United States has very low status, very little respect here in the Middle East right now amongst the Arab nations. And a quick visit by President Biden did not affect a quick fix. Quite the opposite. I think he set some things backwards. So, sweet guy. Maybe he meant well, but the results were negative, I believe. Yeah, we have a very willing government right now in Israel because we have a temporary government. We're having elections in a few months, and we actually have a prime minister right now who is very left-wing, very pro-Palestinian state, and he was just bending over backwards to accommodate President Biden. But hopefully we'll have a new government, a stronger government in a few months, and hopefully we can get through these upcoming few months without too much damage being done, I hope. Let's move on to Parashat Matot. Once again, chapter 30, verse 2. וידבר משה אל ראשי המטות לבני ישראל לאמור, זה הדבר אשר ציווה השם איש כי ידע נדר להשם או הישבע שבועה לעשות איסר על נפשו, לא יחל דברו ככל היוצא מפיו יעשה. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying, this is the thing that Hashem has commanded. If a man takes a vow to Hashem or swears an oath to establish a prohibition upon himself, he shall not desecrate his word. According to whatever comes from his mouth shall he do. You make a vow in Hashem's name, you do it. It's forbidden to take God's name in vain by saying you're going to do something and then not. It's going to go on. There are ways to annul a vow, and it's going to go on to mention that. But I want to focus on this. There's more in the parasha. We don't have too much time left in the show, but I want to focus on this. We posted this week a video by Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, the head of the Temple Institute, where he talks about these verses and this week's parasha and the 3 weeks and the Holy Temple. And as he points out, Jews for 2,000 years have been in our prayers. We want the Holy Temple. We want to rebuild it. May it be rebuilt soon. When you say a prayer with Hashem's name in it, and you say we want the Holy Temple, it's basically a vow. And now that we are in a position to work toward that, we need to keep our word. Whatever came out of our mouth, whatever has come out of our mouth for 2,000 years, we need to keep. We need to hold by. This is a very important lesson. I find it, when people say this, and we say, it's a part of our prayer 3 times a day. It's part of when we say grace at the meal. It's part of before we go to bed. It's part of a wedding. It's part of every religious ceremony. And the Jews have many of them. We mention Jerusalem. We mention the Holy Temple. And we say we want it rebuilt. And we want the service to be renewed. And by golly, do we mean it? Or are we just saying it? We're just giving lip service. I know I mean it. I know I take it very seriously. It means a lot to me. And if I did not believe and feel that way, I wouldn't say it. If I did not sincerely, with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might, want to be part of the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, then I would not say it in my prayers. And I hope that everybody who says it in their prayers feels the same way. Because if we do, all we have to do is realize it and look at one another and say, wow, we're on the same page here. We all want this. We're all praying for it. We all mean it. We're all sincere about it. Let's get together. We can do this. We can certainly do it. People say, how can you do it? There's so much conflict in the world, so much strife. Ultimately, the place to overcome the strife, the place to unite hearts, whether they be Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or any other faith in the world, is the Temple Mount, because that's where God is closest. That's where God hears us. That's where God sees us. And that's where we can stand as equals before Hashem, before one another. Work out these differences. We can do it. We can definitely do it. Because if we can't, I don't want to even think about that. We can do it. We can rebuild the Holy Temple. Please give it some thought. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.